This podcast may contain strong language and adult themes. Hey up, welcome to episode 2 of Voice Notes from Connor with me, Connor Winterton. The podcast where I'm listening back to old voice notes from my past self and responding as my present self with some guests along the way. And we do have another guest. We had my friend Anthony in episode 1, and today we have a guest voice note from my friend Ben. So it's going to be a voice note from my past self, then one from Ben, and then we're going to go back to my past self. So 3 voice notes in this episode. So Evan, when you're ready, take it away. Let's do it. Not to deal too much with a binary here, as a non-binary person, slightly ironic. However, if you're right-wing, and I'm not talking centre-right here, I'm talking like right-wing, so, you know, you vote Reform, you used to vote UKIP, or you've been an ardent Conservative supporter, even when they've done absolutely shit. If you are right-wing, you are thick or greedy. Thick or greedy. Which one is it? Or both? Okay, so in episode 1, I said that this podcast is going to have a dash of politics, and there's your dash of politics. So we're starting strong with thick or greedy. I feel like we're going to have an email now from GB News that'll be like, do you want to come on? Connor versus Nigel, left-wing snowflake versus right-wing fascist. Okay, so what I'm going to do is with this, yes, I am dealing with a binary here, and there is a little bit more nuance than my past self presented, but I very much still agree with my past self there. I probably feel stronger about it now, actually, than I did in that voice note from months ago. So I'm going to start with the greedy part. So what I mean there is that people that vote for right-wing parties often have an economic self-interest. So basically, they are invested in protecting their wealth, lowering taxes, deregulation of markets. So a lot of people that are like business owners that own media companies. So a lot of media companies are or do lean right, or businesses also, business owners, because historically right-wing parties like the Tories, you know, a big part of their politics and their ideology is a smaller government, less regulation, lower taxes as well, and lowering taxes for the wealthy. When really what we should be doing is taxing the wealthy more because they can afford it. So an argument often is, well, if you tax rich people more, they'll leave, which I watched a video recently that was saying that that's not true. That hasn't been true yet. I suppose it's a possibility, but it's something that's the retort straight away, isn't it? It's they'll leave if you tax wealthy people more. We need them here. They're just going to leave if you do tax them more. But if you're right wing and you are a business owner, or what, you don't even have to be a business owner, I suppose. You've just got your own self-interest at heart. That there's an economic self-interest there. That these people will be in opposition to wealth taxes. They might even be against things like climate policy and climate policy rollbacks to protect business interests. So people who vote on the right will have that economic self-interest. I think that's fairly obvious. I could say that's a strong opinion. You could frame it that way, but actually I think it's a fact. We see it time and time again. Let's focus on the media for a second then and look at someone like Rupert Murdoch, which most listeners or watchers, viewers might have heard of before. So Rupert Murdoch owns News Corp, which is a multinational media conglomerate. It also owns companies like News UK, which own The Times and The Sun. Now, for a long time, it was said that whoever The Sun as a newspaper and an institution supports, whether that be Labour or Tory, right or left, they're probably going to win the election. So someone like Rupert Murdoch has a lot of power and a lot of control. Rupert Murdoch is also right-wing. So you'd think to yourself, so why does he want to own these companies? What's the point of all that? Why does he even maybe want to try and push his own rhetoric and ideology into his publications, his newspaper and his companies? He's a very, very rich man. He's a very wealthy man and therefore has economic self-interest, is selfish, basically. Capitalists, right-wing people who are greedy and have that economic self-interest are selfish. It's about them. They're not thinking about others in society that rely on a welfare state, that rely on lower taxes or lower national insurance to live, especially nowadays in a cost of living crisis, where a lot of people's shopping and their energy bills are, significantly higher than they were 5 years ago, 10 years ago, even more so. So there's a selfishness at the heart of that kind of right-wing politics, and there's a greed there, and that is, we've seen. We've got 2 other voice notes to go through. I think you could make this episode really long. I talk about lots of other examples, but I think Rupert Murdoch is a really pertinent example of that idea of greed and economic self-interest. Now, when we go on to the other side of the binary, then when we think of thick, that's touching upon how perhaps more uneducated people are more susceptible, I would say, to right-wing politics, and often, therefore, circulate or believe in those right-wing ideologies. So there's this idea that people who perhaps aren't as educated, and I'm striving for nuance here, people, I'm trying not to be quite as harsh as my past self, even though, like I said, I very much do believe this, that maybe these people are uneducated. Maybe it's working class people that are more uneducated because of the schooling system. Maybe it's about their family's values that they have just believed. Because a lot of the time when we're growing up, whether it's explicit or implicit, patent, latent, whether it's like done really intensely or not, a lot of children will pick up on their family's values, and that shapes their own viewpoints and their ideologies as they get older. However, for some of us, we go to school, we're educated, we do certain subjects that might educate us more about politics and different viewpoints on the right and left, go to university, etc., and educate ourselves and think, actually, are right-wing politics really good for many people? Should we be striving more for socialism? Whereas if people didn't have that opportunity, then they perhaps just believe in what their family's values were, or they believe what they see on social media, and they're more susceptible to right-wing populist rhetoric, which we've seen with, obviously, Donald Trump, with Nigel Farage, and other politicians across Europe in the last 10 years, really since 2016 with Brexit, and also the inauguration of Trump, but that wouldn't have been until January of 2017, but when he was voted in 2016. And it's you could argue that politicians, or some politicians, particularly on the right, will deliberately target the uneducated because perhaps that audience sometimes has more simplistic views, and they will make their messaging more emotionally charged and play on binaries themselves of like us versus them. Look at what's been happening for a long time now with migrants, asylum seekers, refugees, and the rhetoric around all of that. That we can't support them, that we don't have space for them. I've seen things as well with people, particularly men on social media, saying they're coming here, they're going to oppress our women, they're going to take our women, they're going to put their religious values into our culture, and that will affect women. When you think, okay, well, where were your posts about domestic violence, femicide, killing women, all of those other issues until now? Because you have racist tendencies, or you are racist, suddenly now you care about women at this point, but you never did before. So when the media, we have a right-wing media in the UK, again, that is a fact, that's not an opinion, that most media outlets, particularly newspapers, are centre-right, or right. The Guardian is probably the only one that could be considered left-wing. The Daily Mirror's got centre-left, and the Daily Star, I don't actually know who's buying the Daily Star these days. Sorry, Daily Star, but yeah. That maybe also is a bit centre as well, but the rest of them are right-wing, and they're more popular newspapers. Daily Mail, Daily Express, The Sun. So, you can see there that there's an amalgamation of factors that if you grew up in an environment where your education wasn't the best, your family values were more right-wing and you believed in those, you read those kind of newspapers and consume that kind of news, that's all adding up then to a part of the population or groups that then believe in and they reiterate these right-wing policies. Some people very much do believe in tradition, but you have to ask yourself as well. So if you think of voting for the right, you think of conservatives. To be conservative is to be traditionalist. It's to believe in tradition and to uphold tradition. But you have to ask, who does that benefit? And normally those people are only interested in their own tradition as well. So who does it benefit? White people, straight people, middle-class people, or other... let's say middle-class people, white people, straight people, able-bodied people. So people who already have some kind of privilege and, giving other people access to things in society, giving them more rights, more equity, equality, diversity, inclusivity, all those things that I believe in and a lot of people on the left believe in. Some people seem to think that that's like taking away their rights, but it's not. You still have your rights. You're just giving people more. It doesn't take something away from you. But again, I would say if you believe in those traditions, there's within that there's a level of a lack of education. And nowadays as well, let's be honest, you can educate yourself a lot more than you could have done 20, 30 years ago. So if you're from a background where you were working class, schooling wasn't great, you had a right-wing family, and you continue to believe in those views, you could have watched hundreds, if not thousands, of YouTube videos, listened to podcasts, read articles online, read books, that you could educate yourself to give yourself a more balanced opinion. I'm not saying to always be left-wing, by the way, but that might lead you to be maybe not be so extreme, because what I'm talking about here is further on the right. So I'm not talking so much about centre-right, even though I'm not a fan of the centre-right either, but I'm talking more right-wing, so going more toward that populism, fascism, ardent conservatism is what I'm talking about here more specifically. When I was younger, I would say my family were, how would I characterise them now? I'd probably characterise them as centre-right, so not really right-wing, but largely centre-right. I think my dad is a classic example, and he wouldn't mind me saying this because I've said it to him as well, and we laugh about it. So he's like classic, centrist dad vibes. Probably a little bit more centre-left, actually, but classic centrist dad. Family... Yeah, there were probably some racist tendencies as well, unfortunately, but overall leaning a bit more right. So I think in my teens, I probably would have, sat around that centre. As I went to university, as I educated myself more, I'm from a working class background. It wasn't like, going to university was a given for me. The council estate I grew up on was quite rough. Not many people went to university, if any at all. I was the first person in my family to go to university as well, and I educated myself, and through that became more and more left-wing because I was able to understand some people's struggles more, the hardships that they have in life, and that we should be striving for a fairer, more equal society, and that's, in terms of like our cultural values as well as economics and money and the welfare state, etc. So even then I could say to myself, these people, they have this background and maybe we could show a bit more compassion because it's not their fault. But I think, okay, but have they even bothered to go out and try and educate themselves more when there are so many sources out there that could just give them a little bit more balance? To finish this, you could also argue that there are some people that go to university that have been educated to master's level, PhD level, that are traditionally academic and intellectual, but still believe in right-wing politics. So often higher education, I would say in general in the UK, correlates with what we could consider like progressive politics, centre-left, left-wing. And obviously some very wealthy, educated people are right-wing for like ideological reasons. Maybe they believe in free markets or a smaller state and all those things. But then we're circling back round, aren't we? We're circling back round to the greedy camp. So even if they're really educated, it's still being shaped by some form of economic self-interest and greed. So yes, we can try and add, and I've tried to there, just add a bit of nuance into that binary that my past self presented, whilst also very much believing in that view that a lot of people that vote on the right, they're greedy, they're selfish, or they're uneducated, and they could, or and maybe they could strive to be a bit more educated through lots of different things. Yeah, so I could say more actually, but I'm going to leave it there because we've got 2 more voice notes. So there's the first one. Yeah, okay. I think the next one is Ben. So before we go into that, actually, let me just introduce Ben. So Ben and I first met last year. I teach courses to adults, so film courses at the Phoenix Cinema in Leicester and the Broadway Cinema in Nottingham. Both fantastic institutions, really important cultural institutions. I've taught at the Phoenix since 2017 and at the Broadway since last year, so that was I've not been there very long, but I often teach a range of film courses at both of them. Ben came along to a course that I did, I think it was on film and textual analysis, so learning the skills to analyse films a bit deeper, and he came along to that course, it was like July, August last year. And we were talking more about films, and, he was wanting to get into more surreal, weird, independent cinema. So we kind of started off as cinema buddies, if you like, and watching films together, and our friendship has grown from there. Now we're good friends. I'm looking forward. He sent a few in, so you're going to hear from Ben a few times in Series 1, and this is his first one, so let's do it.
Why is it that nerdy subcultures and properties, IPs, that kind of thing, have come back around and they're now in fashion? It's like cool to be a nerd nowadays. It was not cool to be a nerd when I was in school, I'll tell you that.
Oh, okay. Interesting. So we're talking there about, thinking about nerdy subcultures being cooler now. So I can't remember if they were considered cool or not back in the day. So when I was in primary school, so between, 1999 to about, 2005, I think, ish, Pokemon was a big thing. So was it called, Evan, was it called Digimon? Yeah, Digimon, Pokemon, and Yu-Gi-Oh! As well. So I used to love playing Yu-Gi-Oh!, watching Yu-Gi-Oh! As well. I used to collect all the cards. I used to play the Yu-Gi-Oh! Card game with my dad, who used to beat me every time, and he was so proud about beating like an 8-year-old at this Yu-Gi-Oh! Card game as well, which we laugh about now. I used to collect Pokemon cards. In school, both primary and secondary school, I was an in-betweener. So I, fortunately wasn't like really bullied or anything. I wasn't like an outcast, thankfully and luckily. But I also wasn't like really popular. So I was an in-betweener. And I actually can't remember if I thought about other stuff, because I know a lot of people did collect Pokemon cards, so whether that was seen as like cool or less cool. However, nowadays, there's a couple of thoughts that I've got on this. So the first one is the mainstreaming of more like alternative or niche content. So maybe it was seen before that like geeky things was like liking comic books, liking anime or manga, video games, all that kind of stuff was framed as a little bit more geeky and nerdy, whereas now those things are much more popular, and that's been infiltrated, I suppose, by capitalism, because capitalism infiltrates everything. So things like, you think of the MCU, the DC universe as well, so superhero films, anime adaptations, video game movies, bigger video game franchises. These things have been more mainstreamed, more popular through that, like, advertising and these companies pushing them more. So what used to be seen as probably a little bit more geeky is now seen as cooler. And that also goes alongside things like merchandise or branding as well, like Pokemon Go, Funko Pops. So like kids collecting Funko Pops or adults collecting Funko Pops as well isn't as judged as it used to be. And I definitely think the mainstreaming of that has played a part in it. Think of like how many like anime or manga you can access now on Netflix, which is one of the... would it be? I don't know. I don't want to give misinformation like the right wing often do. I think Netflix might be the biggest streaming service in the world. Of all of them, I'd say my educated guess would be it's the biggest one or the most popular, or if not, it's like at least top 3. So, you get a lot of content on there. That's like one signifier of how these things have been brought into the mainstream a little bit more as well. Yeah, so I said I had two thoughts. I've got three. I think the next one would probably be about generational differences. So maybe thinking a bit about Gen Z and how Gen Z operate and how they view these kind of things. Every time we talk about a generation, we're painting broad brushstrokes, aren't we? We're making big statements. And I went to a talk, actually, I think it was last month. There was someone that came from, if I remember correctly, the University of Liverpool to do a talk about generations and like defining different generations and how they might interact in the workplace, and how understanding generations and how they interact with each other could then shape let's just call it a better workplace that's more effective or efficient or inclusive or whatever. And he was talking there, he was saying like Gen Z are less judgmental and all these things. I'm sitting there thinking, well, this isn't true, is it? We're dealing with overgeneralizations, but I'm going to do the same thing and say that, Gen Z in general are, I would say from my experience, less judgmental. And they also grew up with some of the things like, like internet fandoms and those kind of things. So they were more used to it than perhaps millennials were, or Gen X, or, going back further, what are the ones, baby boomers? Yeah. So maybe there's less of a binary or a distinction between what is cool and uncool to that generation because they're less judgmental overall. So I think maybe that plays a part in it. And also then social media, being on social media more. So the rise of like visibility and community on social media probably would have played a part in the mainstreaming of nerdy subcultures and making it like cooler or more popular. So in terms of community, which has been happening now since the 90s really, but obviously with, as the internet's got bigger and bigger and we've got, more digital convergence, smartphones, etc., obviously fans can find themselves easier and create a community easier and therefore feel less like an outcast and more seen, I suppose, and have more visibility within those online spaces, which then also transfer to some physical spaces as well, like Comic-Con or certain conventions that people can go to. So fans can kind of find themselves easier. There might be less shame as well. And the visibility through things like TikTok, Instagram, YouTube might play a part in normalizing fandom or normalizing what used to be seen as a more geeky, nerdy culture, maybe even making it more attractive to certain types of people. And because maybe there's less judgment sometimes, that all adds up together, doesn't it? To make something that's more commodifiable, more of a commodity for capitalism. So having like collectibles, limited drops, that kind of thing might make it more aspirational and make it more cool and marketable to people, whilst also being able to connect with people that are like you and have more visibility of it. So yeah, I think a few reasons there as to why nerdier subcultures are a bit more popular now. Okay, thank you for that, Ben. And we conclude episode 2 with one more voice note from my past self. I am currently on holiday and I'm in Barcelona. As you can probably hear in the background, like noises, is skateboarders outside one of the main like museums of contemporary art. And I find it very interesting, these kind of subcultures, right? So like what they're doing, how they're dressed, like they're just flipping around on a skateboard. I don't fully get it, but I'm not judgmental. Like if people enjoy that, go for it. I'm not saying people shouldn't do it or it's stupid, anything like that. It's just so interesting to me, of like this culture, like what they're wearing. Obviously, it's been a subculture for a long time, but I don't see it very often actually in Leicester or many other places. To be fair, there's quite a lot of them here. But yeah, the subcultural elements I find really interesting. And the motivations behind that, like how do you get into it? Like one day you're like, you know what, I want to wear those clothes and skateboard and be part of that culture. Always seems like a really good sense of camaraderie as well. Okay, so I think I explained this in episode 1, that the process that we've gone through with this podcast is that over a long period of time I was recording loads of voice notes and memos about lots of different types of things, and then passed them all on to my producer Evan, and then he organises when they're going to be. So that was a nice thematic connection there, Evan, between Ben's voice note and one from my, I say past self. That was one of the more recent ones, actually, because that was when I was on holiday in Barcelona, as I explained in the voice note. I know you couldn't hear all of it, it's a bit of wind and stuff, but you could hear the skateboarders in the background. Like I said, I went to the music, like the contemporary art gallery there, which was fantastic. So I really recommend Barcelona, great city, and also recommend going to its, I love art galleries anyway, but go to the contemporary art gallery there. It's great. And when I came out, it was all these skateboarders around, and I was just thinking, I don't think I've ever been enough of a fan of anything to like be into something so much that you could just tell from their existence there that their lives were partly or heavily shaped by this interest. You've maybe seen skateboarders and skateboarding cultures before in films, TV, social media, the kind of things they wear. Like, I don't think I'd ever be confident enough just to be in the street skateboarding. And like, I've seen them before in Leicester City Centre when they're skateboarding and they fall off. And I'm like, oh, bless you. Like, sometimes it's quite funny, but bless you. But also, like, the confidence. I would not have the confidence to just do that in front of everyone. And it was the same there in Barcelona. I was like, I admire that. I think that's really cool that they do that and they've got this identifiable subculture. But yeah, I've never been a fan of anything enough. So I teach fandom theory and I've studied fandom theory before. So someone like Henry Jenkins, I check out his work, by the way. So if you're interested in fandom and fandom cultures, his work isn't it's academic, but it's not too dense to read. It's quite accessible. And he's researched fandoms for decades, and he talks about all different aspects of being a fan. And usually being a fan is more intense. And he would state that being a fan comes with a level of participation. So fandoms are what he calls a participatory culture. And what that means is you do more than just consume something. So if you're a fan of a film franchise or a TV series or a musical artist, you wouldn't just listen to the musical artist album or watch the film 15 times. You would go online and circulate fan theories about them. You would create fan art. You would create fan videos and fan edits on YouTube. You would go to conventions. You would go and see that artist in concert, like in like Glasgow, London, Birmingham. You're going to follow them around and go and see them in different places, as a lot of Taylor Swift fans tend to do. And probably these days, like Sabrina Carpenter fans as well, Harry Styles, Chapel Roan. I wonder if Chapel Roan's got a big enough fan base. I would say so, to get people that follow her around. Yeah, I do love a bit of Chapel Roan. I know we've got a voice note in a future episode as well about my music taste and music. So he would say there's that participatory culture. Often fandoms come with things like textual poaching as well, so they might take things from a film or a TV series or a video game and recontextualize them. So things like shipping. There is another term, but I can't think of it now, Evan, that's more specific to like queer people, like where they want characters to get together in like a film or a TV show that are like presented as straight in a film, but they kind of ship them to be together, like kind of queer baiting as well. Yeah, it's kind of that kind of thing. So you watch a film, they might go and write some fan fiction about it, about, I don't know, a character being gay who wasn't gay in the original film. So they'll go off and they'll make their own texts from it. They'll participate in it. And participation, I've already mentioned some. That could be like having a WhatsApp group where you discuss a new episode of a TV show, all the way through to you do cosplay and you go to conventions and you do YouTube videos, that kind of stuff. And I've never been a fan of anything enough to do that, but I do admire people. I'm slightly going away here from the skateboarding element, but that kind of thing. I mean, like, look at football fans and sports fans as well, that like real ardent, intense support that they give, that they've got a season ticket, they go every week, even in the winter when it's like -4, they're there sat for 2 hours watching a football game. just like skateboarders, I imagine, still practice in the winter, and that's part of them. It's their fashion. Look at like heavy metal fans and fans of those kind of musical genres. You know them straight away because you know what they wear. They've got this is a stereotype I'm dealing with here, but these classic signifiers would be like longer hair, black clothing, wearing band merchandise, that kind of thing. I've never been into anything enough. Like, I would say I really like things like David Lynch's films, Twin Peaks. I really like the music of Chapel Roan, actually, Dua Lipa. I really like disco music, pop music. I really like independent cinema. But would I ever say I'm a fan of them? It depends how you define fan and fandoms, I suppose. But I would never quite go that far. What I was talking about before with social media and community, right, with like why nerdy subcultures might be more popular, I think that also plays a part in all these subcultures and that sense of community that maybe, like I said in that voice note, didn't I? My past self said, like, how do you even get into this? Like, how does that start? Maybe nowadays that's a 13-year-old watched a TikTok video or followed a TikTok channel, just speaking hypothetically, of a skateboarder, thought they were really cool, quite aspirational. Next thing you know, it's influenced their dress sense, it's influenced the kind of friends they have, the hobby, skateboarding. And so social media, again, is going to play a part in that and is going to bring more camaraderie and community. So, I did enjoy watching them as well in Barcelona, doing the skateboarding. They just all seemed really cool, and it just made me reflect on, like, the nature of fandom, the nature of subcultures, why people do it, and also how I've never quite been invested in anything enough to go that far. Yeah, but I do admire people that do. Right, that brings us to the end of episode 2. Thank you for tuning in. Ciao for now. You've been listening to Voice Notes from Connor. Created, hosted and starring me, Connor Winterton. Produced and edited by Evan Greaves. If you'd like to get in touch, you can message us on TikTok and YouTube. And if you'd like to get in touch via email, our email address is vnfcpodcast@outlook.com. You can send us any feedback, any thoughts on the episodes, as well as your own voice notes that might make it into future episodes or future series. So that was vnfcpodcast@outlook.com. Thank you very much.